we're back.
Welcome to episode 255 of No Direction, the No Direction Network's Pathfinder News, Reviews, and Interviews podcast. I'm Ryan Costello.
And I'm Jefferson J. Thacker, also known as Param.
Param, you know what's great?
Pie?
I'm not going to debate whether pie is great or not. I was going to say characters. But
yeah!
Do you know what's awful?
Characters?
Can be.
Yeah.
And you know what everyone at a Pathfinder table needs? One or more characters.
I was gonna say dice. This isn't working.
Some pie would be good too.
I do have pie. I hate that the one player that was a professional baker left to Florida and is now having to remote play with us, because you cannot remote play the delicious baked goods that were brought to my game table on the regular.
Kathy used to bring us baked goods, but we're not here to talk about baked goods at the game table, Param. We're talking about characters. And you and I have made our share of characters, some good, some bad. And we are joined by somebody who recently posted an article entitled, "There's a Big Difference Between Not Optimized and Not Functional in RPGs," which I feel like is going to play a major role in tonight's conversation. It is author and the man behind the Improved Initiative gaming blog, Neal Litherland. Hello, Neal.
Hello. How's everybody doing?
Doing all right, except I'm thinking of pie. Actually, I'm thinking of cake right now. I've got a
I
couple of days old birthday cake in the fridge upstairs.
Because I find it interesting. I thought I was the only one who had a professional baker who not only would sit at my table. In my case, he was our GM for a while.
Ooh.
So that was particularly interesting. So it's nice to know I'm not the only one.
One of the best cool things about it was he once brought us a cake for the first session of Wrath of the Righteous, and on the cake was the map of the city of Kintargo, which is where it starts.
That's pretty awesome.
I would applaud, but there's a mic in front of me, and I don't want to give anyone feedback.
Yeah. Neal, you make my life hard.
What?
I try.
You really do. I mean, you have caused me to stay awake for nights on end. You're responsible for at least 3 dozen death threats I have. Yeah, because you make these really cool blogs, and they rile people up sometimes, quite often. And as somebody who has to monitor the Pathfinder and Starfinder communities online and administrate them, that has led to some stressful evenings.
Yeah, I do apologize. Hopefully the points at least landed well, even if certain people didn't appreciate them.
Oh, sure. And immediately afterwards, we have a much nicer group usually.
That's fair.
Banhammer's a great weapon to specialize in.
Very true.
Which, to be clear, is not a threat to Neal for posting these blog articles, right?
Absolutely not. No,
right.
It's the easy thing to have done would have been to ban Neal ages ago, but then we wouldn't have been able to have some good conversations about some very well-written blog articles.
I'm helping.
I want to talk about those blog articles, but first, Neal, tell us about yourself. What got you into Pathfinder and gaming in general?
I have a fun story about this, actually. I got into gaming fairly late from lots of people I talked to. Most gamers have been doing it a long time. It was an older sibling or a father or somebody they know who brought them in young. I didn't discover it until I was in college, so I felt like I was a little old to be getting into it at the time. But I started with right around the time 3rd edition switched to 3.5, so that was my very early introduction in the midst when no one knew what mechanics were and weren't available anymore. But as for how I got into Pathfinder, I went to the 4th edition D&D free play test. I decided that it was not for me and backed out. I was going to stick with 3.5, and then Pathfinder came out, and everybody was happy at my table.
Aww.
But if the sub question is how did I get into writing stuff about Pathfinder, I actually was on Paizo's website many years ago, and I was looking for an answer to a rules question out of spite because I wanted to prove to somebody that I was right about this. And while I was scrolling down the frequently asked questions section, on like the left-hand side, just a little innocuous link, it was, would you like to write for Paizo? Yes, I would. Click. And that was how I ended up hitting up James Jacobs, who at the time was, I believe, still head of their fiction department. And I managed through like sheer luck and his willingness to look at a very small couple of stories of mine to get sort of the go-ahead to write the Irregulars, which was the first thing I ever did for Paizo, and is probably the reason anyone took me seriously as a games writer after that point, because I could be like, hey, I've written something for Paizo. Let me write something for you.
I actually missed that you actually contributed to some Pathfinder Tales fiction. That's really cool.
As in the event that anyone is listening who has the ability to make Go, I would be very, very happy to revisit the exploits of that particular squad.
I'm going to put that on my to-read list because I don't believe I actually have read this. This is one of the web fictions that was coming out. This one came out in April 2013.
Oh,
no, it was released in October 2013.
Yeah, it was the odd little thing for my brain case on it is because I usually, when I write fiction, I go for something that's singular character driven, but RPG writing I find is usually more enjoyable with an actual party, and that's why we have a piece of fantastical military-esque fiction in the form of the Irregulars. So it's one tiny little squad of Andoran Irregulars who are just sent on A-team style missions. We don't care how you get it done, just get it done and let us know when it's over.
I thought that if I look at the Pathfinder Tales line, good RPG fiction is a snarky rogue as the main character, which is most of them.
You're not wrong.
Let's see. Do I want to continue with that? All right, so let's talk about how did you develop some of the characters that were in that fiction?
I actually... Probably, I have zero evidence backing up this statement, but I have a feeling that if you were to talk to lots of people who have written game tie-in fiction, particularly for games that they have played, it usually starts with, I had this one character that I didn't get to do the things I wanted to do with, so I put them in the story. And that was one of the main characters. Well, they're all main characters. They're each serve a different function within the squad, but it was Garm Ironhand, the half-orc. He was a monk at the time because Brawler hadn't been released. But he was my first Society character. And I was like, I got to play 2 games with him, and then I couldn't go to Society games anymore due to scheduling changes. And I really missed him, so I just sort of built his friends around him. The captain, I had to change his name. Oh no, I had to change his rank. It was Lieutenant Sturgeon Hook because they didn't want to have someone who was named Captain Hook in the story, which honestly hadn't even occurred to me until it had come out later. But it was Lieutenant Hook was actually a character that I played many, many years ago as kind of a joke. He was like the mad alchemist who really, it's mostly an act. He's a lot smarter than anyone gives him credit for, and the act is so that people constantly underestimate him. But he was sort of their commanding officer that I cribbed from another one-shot game that I had so much fun with. I was like, there was potential in you. We're going to bring you over here. And then those were the only 2 characters I had played personally. Actually, no, that's a lie. Gunner. Yeah. It was so 3 of the 5 members of the squad were characters out of my personal Rolodex, and the other 2 I was like, all right, who do we have that could fill the other roles you need for a squad? So that was how we got our scout and our chaplain.
I'm just imagining you with 3 bad costumes doing all the roles for this.
Just change up my facial hair for each one, and you're basically good.
I like the
That's
idea.
hard to do.
It is very hard to do. For a while, I was actually I had a Klingon beard without even knowing that's what I was doing, just because I messed with it one day and decided to keep it.
What makes it a Klingon beard?
It was essentially the beard that Gowron had, that big trifork.
Okay.
I had never seen any episodes with the character in it because I'm not a huge Star Trek guy. And I walked in and my roommate just kept making honor jokes, and I had no idea what he was doing. And so he sat me down and we watched it, and I decided, in view of knowing this, I'm not changing it. I'm keeping it now. It was on my
driver's license. Change it.
Yeah, it was on my driver's license for 8 years.
So I like the comment in chat from Kitsune Warlock, the No Direction Network's own Dustin. He's saying that he calls that his mental folio of NPCs.
Yep. If you can't populate a city, you need to play more.
Param, while we're talking about chat, how could people get in touch with us during these live episodes?
Yes, indeed, because every episode of No Direction is filmed live in front of a Twitch audience. If you just go over to twitch.tv/No Direction, Wednesdays at 8, no, not 8:30. That's when we prep. Wednesdays at 9 o'clock p.m. Eastern, which is 6 o'clock p.m. Paizo Standard Time. You'll be able to join in the chat. We will gather the questions throughout the show and forward them on to our guest.
So, Neal, let's talk about the big difference between not optimized and not functional in RPGs. The blog post that got us to invite you onto this conversation.
Absolutely. Yeah. Should I just spitball, or do you have specific questions and or
Well,
points?
go for an overview for people that haven't had a chance to read it and just cannot figure out what this article is about based on that title.
Totally fair. There is, at least particularly with Pathfinder, more for first edition than second, but it shows up in both of them from what I've seen. There are arguments of people who say that you must choose the best options to achieve your goal, and then there are other people who say that they can pick whatever they want as long as it's fun, which are sort of the two extreme ends of the character building opinion scale. And I was attempting to point out there is a middle portion of, you don't have to be the best of the best at the thing you are trying to do, but you do have to make sure the rest of the table isn't forced to carry your weight.
Absolutely. I could not agree more. There is nothing more frustrating than dealing with somebody who's not on the same page as the rest of the table and is not willing to try to adapt in a certain way. It gets very frustrating having to deal with that, because I do wish players have freedom to make cool characters and do the cool things they want to do, and I very, very, very stringently keep other players at my table from trying to play somebody else's character. But selfishness takes all sorts of forms, and it's always bad.
Truth. It was sort of, I have sort of an investment in this particular topic for a reason. Of anyone who has had me at their table, usually they scoff at this statement before I sit down, and then they watch me play, and they're like, "Wow, you are cursed." I had one session, I rolled 11 natural ones in a row.
I thought you said a half dozen. Did you say almost a dozen?
Almost a dozen in a row. There were more in the session,
worse.
But that was without a break. It wasn't the same die. I used other dice. I used other people's dice. I rolled them in a bucket.
You do that to those other people?
They offered the sacrifice. I did not
tried
take them.
Using the other hand? Maybe it's your technique.
Yeah, I tried using a cup. I tried using a dice tower. There's a very strange thing, we are all logical individuals and we understand how science and math works.
Right.
At the same time, dice have personalities, and mine are spiteful. And it's a thing I have noticed of usually if a GM is going off script or trying to wheedle out of a situation, that's when the 20s start rolling for no reason. But it was as a result of my having entire sessions without breaking double digits. I was like, all right, if I want to be effective at all, I need to be able to go on a 5 or more. If I roll if I roll at least a 5, I still have to be able to hit the monster, cast the spell, succeed on the skill check, whatever it is. And I understand not everyone is cursed the way I am. But because of that curse, I am basically driven to seek out the most effective way to do something, but then 3 or 4 other methods of accomplishing it for people who don't necessarily want to go that route.
Yeah, whenever the idea of a cursed player comes up, I do have to give a shout out to Jeff Chapman from one of my gaming groups, who most famously accidentally rolled a 1d200 on a digital roller and still managed to miss. And is so bad that for a wedding gift, he gave everyone in our in our Pathfinder group a D20 that had Jeff instead of a 1 on it. And when he started making characters, he would always focus on casters, and he would focus on spells that required saving throws, so he didn't have to roll.
Yep, it was. I had one character of occasionally I will get amazing stats for a character, and it's why I will always roll my stats directly in front of the GM, so they have witnessed it and they're not thinking I'm just trying to get ahead because I have bad luck. And I think my dump stat for the character was a 15. It was absurd.
Wow.
At which point I was like, this is going to be a sorcerer. I will not make a single D20 roll for the rest of the campaign if I can avoid it.
There was another blog post that you posted. Actually, I think since that post that caught our attention, and it's something to the effect of like middle ground does not work in Pathfinder.
Oh yes, it was.
Mhm.
It's sort of the other end of the coin. Of I have This is a particular thing of I like to bring new people into the game whenever I can because there are so many players that take one look at the big honkin' text, that is first edition. They're like, no, I don't want to read that. Like, you don't have to read all of it. It's fine. Just sit down. Here's some cliff notes for your page, and I will walk you through the rest. I tend to run boot camps for people, just covering all the important stuff. But there's this urge, and I probably ruined like 6 or 7 characters of my own before I realized I was sabotaging myself with it. And it's that desire to be able to do everything until you realize, like, this is not a novel. Your character can't have every skill and be effective at every skill. You can't cast all the spells. You can't have all the feats. You don't get to be Batman whether or not you're playing a vigilante. You have to pick and choose what you're going to be good at. And it was actually my first bard, the class that's supposed to be good at everything,
Mhm.
where I realized, like, I had spread my resources so thin that at level 1, level 2, level 3, it was fine. If I had a good die roll, I could still succeed. Level 8, 9, 10, suddenly, if you didn't focus, you're not going to be able to participate in this. You've tanked your base attack bonus. You haven't taken the right feats. You don't. You took a bunch of unconnected stuff that doesn't get bigger as you level. It's not necessarily like your fault in that you didn't intend for this to happen, but because of the way the mechanics work, you now are not at the level you need to be, to take on these particular challenges, which can be very frustrating if, the image on the paper isn't matching the image in your head.
And for the record, it's well-rounded rarely works in Pathfinder's the title of that blog post.
Yeah. And
Yes.
I think these two things, like you said, they're very closely tied to each other because they're really referring to the same concept, which is Pathfinder is a game in most RPGs, but especially Pathfinder, Starfinder, Pathfinder 2. If you're in the Paizo family, these games very much share this assumption that it is a group of characters who all have a specialty working together, and the game's math assumes that when it throws up a challenge, it is usually going to be a character well suited to taking on that challenge that is going to go against it, and therefore the math of the game is balanced around that assumption that you're good at what you're doing. And if you're a character who is bad at what they're supposed to be doing, then you're going to have a very hard time, especially if it's a pre-written scenario. But even if it's just a GM using the standard recommended charts for the challenge rating that you're supposed to be competing in, the math will still end up being something you probably won't be able to hit on anything below a 15 if I've seen some of the characters that have been uh, mediumed out. And if you're trying to be good at everything, well, there is very limited resources to make your character good in the first place. And if you spread that too thin, then you're basically never going to be hitting the expected I'm good at it number and therefore not be able to contribute at all.
There's actually another post of mine to piggyback off of that. It was nobody wins when you play a stupid wizard is the title, and I remember it specifically because it enraged so many people. But it was like there's another urge that lots of people have of they want that story beat that you get in a lot of movies and a lot of fiction of the wizard's apprentice who just doesn't quite get it until the clinch moment when they're fighting the boss and suddenly they unlock their magic, or you have the knight squire who's always been kind of a bumbler until that moment where suddenly all their training comes together. And it's one of those of it's a great story beat, but mechanically the game is going to punish you if you tank the thing you're supposed to be good at. And it was the example I use is someone who like builds a wizard but puts their high stat in strength and their low stat in intelligence. I see what they're going for, but it's like that is doing the opposite of how the game is written, how the rules work, and all it's going to do is frustrate you when you can't have that moment of now I'm good at magic. No, you're not going to be. You could take all the resources you get from now to the end of the campaign, and then you will be good at it. But the sorry, I had a brain fart. But the suggestion that I made in that circumstance is when you twist the story assumption so that it fits the mechanics you do have. You know, in the example I gave for the wizard, of you have someone who they were never really intelligent. They didn't get the ritual that their master tried to impart to them, but they were just smart enough to summon an outsider. You know, so now they make a deal and they become a witch, a summoner, a warlock, whatever option that is. So you still have a character who's a caster, you still have a character who lacks that real grasp of the arcane, but you have another stat that you're casting with. So now you have all of the effectiveness that you want, and you've just kind of tweaked your story so that it still fits with the mechanics. And, you know, similar thing of if you wanted to have someone who, you know, comes from the tribe of big hulking barbarians, but they themselves are very slim and very slender, like, that's cool, don't change that. Play a rogue, play a slayer, play any other class where it's, you know, fight smarter, not harder, because you're just surrounded by these brutes and you can't keep up with them going toe to toe. You know this. So yeah, you've had to find other ways to succeed, which isn't always the beat people want to go with, but I find that a lot of the time it sort of marries together that desire to think outside the box while still being able to roll the die and have your win.
So you've brought up a lot of you've reminded me of a lot of my characters, because I do like to play the character that is a spin on things. And probably the one that's most related to the point you're just making right now is I had a gnome, a giant slayer. And the thing was that he had more strength than the average gnome, even though he had less strength than the average fighter, which was how he was still functional. And what was really cool is that because he was so small and nimble and had such high hit points because of the constitution bonus, he was taking hits and either soaking up the damage or getting missed. And so he was still contributing to combat. He was doing the thing the fighter should be doing. It was just in an unconventional way. So that part of the character was still functional. The choice to make him a spring attack 2-weapon fighter was a poor choice on my part, and was not part of the original conceit of the character. But at least the other part, the underestimated fighter, was still a functional part of that character, even though it looks contrary to what you would expect.
Absolutely. You know, brief aside, you know, it's a thing that I will remind everyone as your, like, you know, it's like pro GM tip of the day. Getting the enemy to waste their time is a huge contribution. If you can get the GM to swear and not hurt anyone, you know, by either like being missed, saving against the spells, whatever it is, you did a thing this turn, even if it doesn't feel like it.
And I think that works because Ryan is following a very important rule that's recommended for all sorts of professional and skilled work, which is Ryan knows the rules and knows when to break the rules. And also Ryan made a character that still did something. And so out of character, that character had a point and did its thing very well. But that's different from in character, fight or fight bad. You know, barbarian bad, yeah, but also this character was very functional and did cool things. And Ryan's able to do that because he knows the system and knows how to work the system. Whereas a lot of people, where I see this become a frustration point or an anger point, or a point of contention, is when people are trying to make the game do what they want it to do instead of what it actually does, by not understanding the system and just assuming that everybody else at the table and the GM is going to make up for that lack of knowledge for them.
I have a story about that if we have time for a brief aside.
Yes.
So I had a friend of mine way many years ago at this point. And before anyone gets too incensed, the player in this story has since learned his lessons and grown and become an absolute joy to game with. But this was very early in his career, and he had to learn a lot of hard lessons.
Was this the player that you were trying to prove wrong out of spite?
Oh no, this was somebody. This is something different. But so it was a Paizo game though. They were running Shackled City, which I absolutely adore. I have a very soft spot in my heart for urban campaigns. But the GM in question really wanted me to go with the option of a half orc, and I had some, again, really, not as good as the other one that I mentioned, but I had some pretty decent stats, and I had never gotten to finish the Frenzied Berserker like prestige class. And so I was like, I'd really like to do this, but I understand if you say no because you don't want that kind of mayhem at your table. And so he basically told me, it's like, I have gamed with you long enough. I trust you to pull back on this if it becomes a problem, and to do everything in your power not to just like actively hulk out on people. If the dice roll poorly, the dice roll poorly. There's nothing we can do about that. And so I had the half orc fighter barbarian with all of the feats that you give to someone in that edition. Was it leap attack, supreme power attack, all that good stuff. Hit things real good. And there was another individual, the individual that I mentioned. He was playing I don't remember what they were called, but they were a sort of humanoid avian race. It wasn't a Tengu. They just had
The Raptorans.
Yeah, the Raptorans. That's what it was. Thank you. And I believe it had like an equivalent character level of 4 or 5 attached to it.
No, that was one that you could start at. There was no APL.
Okay, I might be thinking of something else then.
Maybe.
So, whatever it is he had picked, it had something you had to trade your character levels for in order to get. And he was playing our cleric, so good on him. Always nice to have a cleric. And he had really only played fighters before that, which was a problem to begin with. But we're like, okay, he can learn. It's early in the campaign. But the difficulty was that his character, who was mostly dex-based, didn't have a good con score, didn't have a base attack bonus, wasn't using his spells, was trying to wade in alongside, to quote my own article telling the story, the monster truck that ran on the bloated virgins. And Arius was a nightmare.
All right.
But it was one of those he was getting very frustrated because the cleric would run into combat, just get one-shotted down to unconsciousness, and then the barbarian would have to run in, kill whatever it was that had knocked him out, and then fire him and carry him off the field. And it took 7 or 8 times of this happening for him to finally just realize that he had not built an effective combat character, even though he kept trying to run into combat. So that's really the situation of like when you have a character who is very clearly meant for one role and you try to put them into another role, you have to give them the resources to fill it. Otherwise, they're just going to be face into wall until they eventually fall down.
And this is where communication is super key as well. If this happens unintentionally, and I've had that happen a lot too, where just it's a new player or player that's not familiar with the class or some of the mechanics of the game, where they're trying to make a good character and they just made bad choices. This is much more common in Pathfinder 1, where you have so much freedom and can very easily make a bad character in Pathfinder 1, just as easily as you can make a completely broken character. Which is why I really love Pathfinder 1. It's wonderful sometimes. But, then when that happens, then you can have a conversation with the game master and go, hey, this isn't working. I wanted it to work like this. How can we fix it? And then, fix the character. Because as a GM, it's almost always worth it to let that rebuild instantaneously happen in these situations so that everybody at the table is suddenly having more fun. But this is very different from a character that is intentionally trying to play a weak character at what they're supposed to be contributing at the table, which I'll get into later, but that doesn't mean combat always. I mean, characters can have lots of ways they contribute to the party and be wonderful.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to bring up one of, I'm sure, many G.I. Joe references in this conversation. There was an early draft of the first G.I. Joe script where Wild Bill, the helicopter pilot, got airsick, regularly. This was his thing. And it's like, I'm sure when the writer wrote that, they're like, isn't this clever? And it's like, no, that's stupid. He is the helicopter pilot of an elite military unit. He should not be getting airsick. He should be the opposite of that. He should suck sickness out of everyone else just by being so good at being a helicopter pilot. He probably should not suck sickness out of other people. That's just, I don't know where that came from. But yeah, if you think a certain concept can be clever, like I said, I do like characters that are exception-based in their core. It's an exception, not a contradiction.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think that's an important point to mention of, just because there's a general rule of, all X are, X are generally Y doesn't mean that X must be Y. Yeah, it's a conversation I've had with many, many, many people, particularly about paladins, oddly enough.
Yeah, for an example for the network, when I wanted to make a unusual character for the network, I'm like, I'm going to make a paladin who uses dexterity and a longbow. And I went about making sure that the character was competent at doing that thing, that he and was very good at being the character that it was supposed to be, and very good at shooting goblins in the dark. It turned out be very, very good at shooting goblins in the dark.
Aren't those great?
They're fantastic. And so, but I didn't just try to make the character do something that's just the game system completely can't handle. And if you do run into that, if you have a character concept that's like, I want this character concept to work, this is what I get, and there's nothing in the rules that supports this, that's when you have a conversation with your GM and try to figure out a house rule to make it work that's balanced and fun for everybody, instead of trying to just force. You cannot brute force of will your way through a math-based game.
Truth. Oof. I think we all have stories about that one.
Yeah. There are other game systems where this works. I mean, you could play a fate game and you can have some fun with this sort of concept.
Sorry, I thought you said
Pathfinder
fake.
is no. These games don't exist. All games that aren't Pathfinder are, yeah.
Feng Shui is a good one for it if anybody can get a hold of it these days.
We only let Starfinder slide because it's got Finder in the name. No, but like if you play Fate or Gumshoe or a lot of games that are that have a lot more improvisation or flexibility of characters or meta systems, then these sorts of characters actually can be fun at the table and work. But that's because they work in a game system designed to support those kinds of characters. Remember, you're playing Pathfinder, a game about very skillful murder hobos that go into dungeons and kill deadly monsters for a living.
After we take a second, you were just stalling, and I want to make sure that we don't have a delay.
Yeah, I'm seeing lots and lots of red right now.
How's the weather in your area?
Completely fine. I'm gonna cut my bandwidth. Okay. No, I'm gonna cut my bandwidth, and I'm gonna cut my camera to y'all. I think is what I'm gonna do.
Okay, and we'll do a sound test, and then we'll get back to things.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Tell me when you're ready.
All right. We are ready.
When I say make some, you say noise. Make some.
Noise.
Make some.
Noise.
Yeah, okay. There's like no delay. We're good.
Huzzah.
Excellent.
All right, 5 seconds of silence for your edit. Question mark.
That was silence. I was giving silence.
We don't have your video, so I was...
Oh, sorry.
For an answer.
This is where I fake disconnect noises and disappear from the episode.
Exactly. That's what I was worried had happened. Okay. 5 seconds of silence.
I don't want to leave this in. It's too funny.
All right, then leave it in. You're the editor.
Yes!
Abuse your power.
So, Neal, going back to your well-rounded, rarely works in Pathfinder, that was my mistake with my first 2E character, or at least my first long-term one. It's my play-by-post character, Say Yes, which it was not meant to be Batman, it was meant to be Snake Eyes. And so I tried to make him good at sword, good at Uzi, so I used a hand crossbow, working towards a repeater crossbow, and good at wolf. And I'm just not good at anything. I tried to be too good at too many things. I thought I'm playing a character that doesn't speak, so I can dump my my charisma, but then I would not be good at wolf, and I really wanted to be good at wolf. And so he is just too down the middle and pretty useless. I am an embarrassment to Snake Eyes. Which is not the first time that's happened this week.
I also think that was a fundamental misunderstanding of charisma. Snake Eyes has heck of charisma. That's because, everybody loves the dude, even though he doesn't say a word.
Fans love the dude, but it's not like Quick Kick hangs out with Snake Eyes after work.
That we know of.
I'm confident that Snake Eyes does not hang out with Quick Kick after work.
I would watch that post-credits scene.
All right. I am still going to say that I could have got away with a dumped charisma stat for a proper Snake Eyes build without a wolf. But anyway, so that was my mistake there. Just trying to be too many things in a single character, and I've just I'm good at it. I'm okay at everything, and I'm not good at anything. And I did not set out to make an okay character, and I don't benefit anyone from being an okay character. Succeeding and everyone being like, hey, wow, you actually did something. That's not a great feeling, even if everyone is cheering for me in the moment.
Yeah, there is I have not read closely enough of second edition. I gave the playtest a look and then haven't looked at it since. So
It
I
is a
do.
different game from the
It
playtest, I
is.
assure you.
I'm very pleased to hear that. It's mostly time of the sheer amount of stuff I have to put together does not leave time for reading entirely new game systems. But I will say for first edition, generally speaking, you have the resources to be good at 2 to 3 things. Just really good. This is your thing. And like you can be okay at a couple of other things, but generally this is another one of those pro tips for people out there of if you're going to be okay at something, that's when it's time for you to become the sidekick of someone else in the party. Whether it's the barbarian who like knows just enough sense motive to get it, following around the monk as sort of his the Watson to his Holmes. And like that can give you a lot of good moments because you can still assist and you can participate in the role play and you can have a part of the scene, but it doesn't ride on you being able to take to take the lead on that. It's a nice little workaround I found for people who get very frustrated that they feel like if it's not their thing, they have to stand in the background and do nothing while somebody else lets things ride.
I think that applies to second edition fairly well, especially because of the siloing. Like you will be very good at 2 things or and okay at one other thing, because if you build your character without intentionally trying to sabotage it in 2e, you can be good at your primary combat purpose because the game system silos all the combat options over in one side of the room, and then in the skill half of the game, you'll be very good at 1 or 2 skills, and unless you're a rogue, in which you will be very good at skills, all of them, and that's good, and that's about it. It works out about right.
So let's say you have to sit down. It's time to make a new character. We'll start with you, Param, because Neal, if you don't mind, you've had a good chance to talk.
Go
but
ahead.
I'd like to get a little of Param's insight here first. So it's time to make a new character. What do you do? How do you approach it? You've got literally nothing, and your game is tomorrow.
Well, that first I'm frantically messaging all my other players that I'm going to be playing with, because here's the secret to making a good character. You made a character that works with the other ones. And I don't make a character in a silo, and if I ever have to, then I literally will have 2 or 3 backups, or in mind some major substitutions that I will make at the table if I run into a conflict. Because again, I repeat, we are a group game. So the first thing I'm doing when I'm making a character is I'm sharing my top level concept with the other players to make sure it's got a place at the party. Like, hey, it's me, I'm known for wizards, so hey, I want to probably play this type of wizard. I'm gonna want to play it with this sort of character stick. Where does this fit in? Oh, as a great example, Glanville and Xavier. I originally was going to make Glanville because we were playing a very political game, was going to be an enchanter. I saw that Xavier was wanting to be a bard that was going to be very good at bard things. And so I was like, you know what? I'll let Xavier have all the enchantment magic, and I'll refactor Glanville into an illusionist. And then Xavier proceeds to hardly ever touch enchantment magic, but that's beside the point.
Sometimes I make people hideously laugh.
Yes. So I was like, Xavier can have that stick, and I intentionally did not make my character good at a thing another player was trying to be good at, so that when I have my spotlight time, Xavier can have Xavier's spotlight time, and then together we can do cool things together, but it's not the 2 of us constantly competing for the same slot in the spotlight time.
I'm also going to say the flip side of that is that often I will come into a new game with a very solid idea of what a character I want to play, with usually a couple of backups like you. That was actually very good advice there. And the main reason is because I am used to coming into a group and everyone being like, well, what are you playing? What are you playing? As long as one person steps forward and says, like, this is what I'm playing, then everyone else can start making their decisions about what they're not playing. Things start falling into place. Otherwise, you've just got a, what do you want for dinner tonight type of situation, but for your campaign.
Yeah. I guess
I want sushi. That's what we're having.
I'm just lucky. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I'm just lucky that I get to play with cool people like y'all and like very good, strong, experienced role players that have an idea of how this stuff works and how to make good characters. Those people hardly ever have a hard time deciding on. Like, I don't have a whole lot of no you, what do you want conversations when it's in the KD actual play chats.
Did you want to do your next step, Param, or are we moving on to? Are we doing everybody's first step for the character creation? How would you want to go forward?
Everybody's first steps.
All right, so Neal, you have to make a new character. What do you do?
Lovely. First thing I do, I get a hold of the GM and be like, all right, pitch me. What is this campaign? It's
good idea.
Yeah, I used to just like pick whoever out of my ideal list that I've had laying around. If I've wanted to play this character for a while, it's like, oh, we're doing an undead game. Never mind. We put back the court spy and we pull out this instead. I find that if I'm starting fresh, not just grabbing an idea I've had laying around for a while, like first things first, like what's the environment? Like what because once I know that, it's going to gray out certain character concepts. Like you're not going to bring a goblin hunting ranger to a game where you're never going to see a goblin. And then like after that, I move on to your guys' step one of what's everybody else doing? What roles we got filled? It's never cleric. It never is. But that's why my last one was a war priest. But at that point, what I like to do, because I am notoriously loudly mysterious. I won't tell people what I'm doing, but I won't tell them in a very loud way. Like I will name whatever role my character is going to fill without being like I'm playing like the cleric, I'm playing the paladin, I'm playing the ranger. Be like, do we have a beat stick? Do we have anyone for like melee? Okay, I'll take that. How are you going to do it? You let me worry about how. That's the job I will do. And then like this is just a thing that I have found is very useful of if you can get the rest of the table not to think of like both your character and other characters around in terms of what's your class, so that no one's going like, the barbarian wants to say something. It's like, oh no, it's Jeff. What you got, Jeff? It has this weird effect on the game of like people start seeing your character more and they start thinking less in terms of who should be participating in what situation based on your mechanics, and more like, well, who do we want to send in to talk to the Duke? The fighter. He's like, why the fighter? Because the fighter has a noble background and he like jousted with this guy's son. We'll let him talk to politics. So like, yeah, those are my first two steps. And like third step is usually just like, once I know what everybody else is doing, I will pick a concept, throw it out there, be like, hey, anyone interested in like hooking this up with their backstory? I will come in fresh, not knowing anyone if that's what you want to do, but I'd prefer not to do that if I can avoid it.
So my first step is I want a hook. I want something that separates this from any other character that I've ever played before. And it could be anything. It could be a mechanical hook, like when I read the Mad Dog Barbarian, and I was like, I want a barbarian with a kangaroo. Can I make that happen? That's the hook. That's where I'm going with that character. Or more recently in Troubles in Otari, when I just came up with the term adventurepreneur, and I was like, I don't know what I want to do with that, but I definitely 100% am committed to making a character that is an adventurepreneur. So in as few words as possible, I want to be able to define an idea. And before, it could be mechanical, or even before I start going into mechanics or personality or campaign or anything, just knowing this is the direction I want to go in with my character, and then figuring out where to go is the next step.
Do you have your adventurepreneur on the map? Because I want to hear stories about this.
Yeah, so that was Gladys Stern. So eventually I figured out I can make him a champion of Abadar. So Abadar is a very commerce-based god, but champion, you're the notorious good guy. And I was like, both of those things are kind of known for being a bit of a jerk. People who worship Abadar are very like rule-centric and very commerce-centric. And champions and paladins are known for being the real stick in the mud. So it's like, all right, so I want a lot of personality. I want this to be the antithesis to the expectations of the champion and the ruler of Abadar, worshiper of Abadar. And I went with like, I'm going to try and have like a Tony Stark swagger. And that's where the Stern came from, because it is a play on Stark. And then my next step was hitting Hero Forge and just making a guy in red and gold armor with a big honking key that was the Hammerdar. It's the Hammer of Abadar key. And that, yeah, from there, the character was really starting to build itself. Like, I hadn't really looked at any mechanics beyond I want him to be a champion, and I already knew full, like, when I went full speed ahead from there, I knew exactly which direction I was going with him.
Huzzah!
Yeah.
And that brings me to my step 2, which is I go looking to hook with other characters. So when I was making our Troubles in Atari character, I was looking for how am I going to hook this kindly old necromancer in with the rest of this game. And so it became hired by the adventurepreneur to oversee this young, scrappy group of sensitive kitsune that were going to go ghost hunting. Because I think the stick is that because ghosts are living rent-free in these houses, and that isn't right with Abadar. Is that correct, Ryan?
Well, and that contracts are till you die, unless it says otherwise. We really needed to look at the lease on that building to see if the ghost had any legal rights to it.
I love the fact that the necromancer sounds like the kindly old town vet. That just makes me happy. So I'm just picturing just like a bony mare with just big saddlebags and just like a cloth covering it up so it doesn't scare anyone.
I mean, not far from that.
Oh, he really means the best.
There was something that happened, and I said, your character looks like the after, and my character looks like the before. I forget what it was, but
we
it was
had the same hair, and
yeah.
we had the same. Our models looked really similar. We had the same hair, and kind of a lot of the same choices because we both made the. He goes, Hero Forge is just too convenient to have when you're throwing online characters together in a hurry, and it was like, yeah, that does look like the before and after.
Yeah, like we could have been on the back of a box for a new edition of Fable, and it's like, look at all the different directions you could take the one character in.
Yeah. I was thinking like, oh, this is a Dare commercial. This is your character. This is your character on necromancy.
Oh dear.
All right, Neal, you kind of brushed on your step 2, but did you want to embellish what you do from there?
Sure. Once, good example I have for it is last Rise of the Rune Lords, when we finally went through it. Took 3 tries, but we finished the thing.
Congratulations. I only got to book 5.
Yeah, each one had like a different character and a different shtick, and same DM for all 3 of them. Bless them. But the last time I went into it, I was like, fine, you want big heroes, and I know that most of the things in this book are evil. Paladin, bleh. But it was again, it's the question of like, take this thing that everyone has assumptions about and play with it. What do you get? And they were unwise enough to give me an ASMR. There's the whole thing about how it went down is on my blog for people who go to the table talk section. But his whole thing was, I wanted people to look at him and their first thought to be like, wearied sword for hire, not champion of justice and righteousness. And so we had kind of the Han Solo to the very large and savage looking Slayer that was his best friend walking into town. He has a long sword, he has like chainmail on underneath his shirt, but he's tired. He's not entirely sure that his journey's over, and he just gets mixed up in shenanigans. And that was kind of my step 2 of I know what I had a bit of meta knowledge of I know what's going to go on session 1. And so it's here's the impression I want everybody to get. And I'll usually come up with here's 2 or 3 hooks that I can sort of pass around the table of like, you recognize this thing, make me a flavor knowledge check about it, and then I will give you a little piece of my backstory. So the table can kind of start putting together what weird little mystery I have set down in front of them.
So my next step is figuring out what the experience of playing that character is going to be like, not just for me, but also for the people at the table, because my goal is for when people play at a game with me, when they leave, they still remember the character as much as they remember anything about the game. And so I was thinking about a character earlier today. They introduced fighting sticks, which are kind of like tonfas in the Mwangi Expanse. And I was like, ooh, Bard Drummer. And then I was thinking like, all right, so then like, let's say I'm a drummer at the table. Like I was just be constantly doing this when it's not my turn, just air drumming. Mm-hmm. And one thing I could do is like, so like when it is my turn and I'm like inspiring people, I'm just going to be like, and making the air drums. And then I happened to be at a bookstore earlier today, and I was mentally preparing for this episode, and I noticed that they had these drumstick pens. It was a pair of pens that looked like drumsticks and came in a package. And I was like, I kind of want to buy those, even though I actually don't have plans for this character. I just plans for this character as an anecdote in the podcast. But like the universe is pointing me in a direction that it's like, I want to show up at a table, put down my drumsticks, be the drumstick bard, the drummer bard, and just go from there. And I have no idea how viable this character is. I'm not super familiar with the 2E bard, and I don't know how combat effective it is. But like just the vision in my head that I've started to put together just from the experience point of it, the idea of what this character feels like at the table for me and the other players. It's really got me interested in this theoretical character at this point.
I want to see how this turns out. I'm excited.
All right, I'll keep you posted. I picture like a oh yeah kind of voice for the character.
So you got like slash hair. No one actually knows what color eyes he has.
Oh, that'd be good. Yes, I wasn't thinking exactly. Like I was definitely thinking some kind of rock star, but that specifically with just like hair in his face, almost the Ring Girl style. And I was thinking gnome.
Yeah. So that way it can change as you have more weird experiences. Just go through the entire hair metal era.
He has his pink phase and his blue phase. I have to make this character now.
But what happens when you hit Nirvana?
That's when you get debuffs.
Oh, nice.
You get everybody else gets haste, but the music slows down as far as they're concerned.
All right, so Pam, one thing I'm surprised is that so far it feels like a lot of your focus is on mechanics. So at what point do you start thinking about the personality for your character?
Part 1 was mechanics, and part 2 was how's my character going to tie in with the rest of the party. Like that was mostly fluff. Part 3 is now getting into the mechanics, really. Like this is the part where I'm doing that, and that's when I'm also like, okay, now's actually time to make this character. That's when the stats come out. This is when I'm practicing my funny voices. This is when I'm looking for the perfect miniature, or making the perfect miniature, or custom sculpting the miniature meticulously in Blender. This has evolved over the years, but basically that's when I start putting the kit together. This is my equivalent of getting the drumsticks, getting the good voice, and building it, and building the stats. This is where most of the quote-unquote making the character will happen. And it's not my last step, because my last step, well, I don't want to skip ahead.
Okay. So like step 3 is like the bulk of the character creation. It's just
right. Yeah. So I know what role I'm going to be able to pick. You know, we've done everybody's grabbed their token. Everybody's called out their musical instrument. You know, I know where I'm going to fit in the party as a whole, and those are two conversations. One, am I going to have a combat role? And usually the answer is yes, because we're playing Pathfinder. It doesn't have to be yes. Lily is a wonderful character. And then usually also, am I going to pick up any social roles? Is none of us a cleric, and therefore I'm the one taking the battle medicine feat? That sort of things are decided in that step. Then how am I hooking this in with the other characters so that I know when I'm writing my backstory or I'm building my builds? This goes both ways. Like backstory, I know this character, or we have a heated rivalry, or why am I babysitting these two mystical fox kids?
Who do you
the
owe
truth
a favor
is
to that this
the
is your
truth
job?
is just this is just being there early enough to make sure that I can cater to them in the afterlife, because they're headed there quickly. And that's that step. And this is all of that information has been gathered. Time to put that to paper and then build out the personality and that sort of stuff.
Neil?
I might have gotten ahead of myself a bit, but
you kind of have.
I have had a day. I do not have enough caffeine. But once I know the world, once I know what everybody else is doing, once I've decided my role, usually role and mechanics will come simultaneously in my brain. If I've decided I want to be our frontliner, or I'm going to be our healer, or I'm going to be battlefield control, whatever role nobody else is taking. At that point, I'll just have like the 3 tabs open in my brain of like, here are the different progressive paths you can take. Which one do we want today, sir? This is, give me that one, put it down, we're done. And then like, from there it's, come up with enough of my own backstory and then like pitch to the rest of the table of, and then anyone who wants to have that background connection. Good example of, it's not a spoiler for anybody at my table, so in the event that they listen, they won't get any new information. But we just started Hell's Rebels a little while ago, and I saw like, ooh, we're in a city full of devil worshippers who all need to be punched, and we're not leaving the city for, I need a vigilante. This is what this requires. And so it was that question, while the rest of the table's like, oh, not sure what I'm going to do. And I turned to my one friend and I was like, hey, do you want to be my Robin? And they were like, yeah, that sounds cool. Awesome. You get to know all the stuff that I'm putting into my background, and the GM gets to know all the stuff that I'm putting into it. And everybody else has that thing of, they know the general shtick in that, like, this is my class. You've met the social identity. You've met the the vigilante persona, but they don't know all the other little mysteries that are built into it that I'm just kind of waiting for them to figure out. So that's kind of the last step of figure out who knows what, and avoiding the hardest thing to do when you're proud of a creation of, don't spoil everything before it's time at the table.
So yeah, I think we're all pretty much on the same page at this third step. Mine, I kind of see it as like, first 2 steps is, oh, I woke up with a craving. What do I want for breakfast? And I start thinking of things. Now it's the time to actually, take out the ingredients, make sure that I've got everything I needed. So if like I absolutely knew I wanted some kind of an omelet, now's the time to be like, but what vegetables do I actually have that I could put in this omelet? And like, what flavor do I definitely need in there? And then what'll complement it? So if it's like, if my hook was something very mechanical, now I have to start creating the character. If my hook was something more character-based, I have to start looking at the mechanics. If my hook was some other abstract thing, like just I want to make this action figure as a character, then I start to just look more practical baseline of like, what have I missed? What have I not done? And especially when there's gaps in things, like I could go multiple different ways. That's when I really like to bring in the rest of the party, see what everyone else is doing, see where I've got resources to spend, that if anyone sees a gap, I can spend my resources to fill that gap, my character creation resources.
Leads into my step 4, which is, it's time to call in the editor.
Ooh.
I've created a character. Now I present that character and the write-up, and as here's to the group and the GM. Look this over. What y'all think? Now it's time to fix any problems that are a problem, like, ooh, that doesn't work, or you didn't understand how this actually worked, or actually we both can't do that one secondary skill. All the edits happen there, and also it's where we're looking for opportunities, and I'm looking at the other players' characters and what they brought to the table, and this is when we make the changes. It's like, okay, I was going to make this like kind of a cooking stick in my background, but you're making a whole cooking character, so now I'm taking up improvised comedy, and that sort of thing is happening. Or, oh, you're playing this type of fighter. If I had this spell in my spell book, I could throw that down and it would give you a huge bonus when it's time for you to get your big spotlight time. And I start looking for ways that my character can help out what they're bringing to the table, make suggestions in the reverse, make any edits or changes, wait for the GM to say, oh, actually, it's probably not a good idea for you to worship Abadar in this particular campaign for reasons I can't tell you. Maybe you should look at Pharasma. And that's so, and it's important that I know this editing step is coming up so that I don't get that disappointment moment that, oh, but I really had my heart set on this. And if there's anything I really had my heart set on, it appeared in step 1 and 2 before all this mechanically happened. So anything that at this point that would get changed likely needs to be, I understand that it's all ephemeral until a character hits the table, because even that character is not final. Most role-playing characters do not even cement themselves into existence until the first or second session that you've been playing them, and you found the right funny voice that works, and you've developed your stick, and you realize what combos work. So that's my step 4, is it's time to call in the editors.
I love the idea that you're calling in an editor, because I have definitely done like one last editing pass on builds and made changes and didn't realize that they either were bridged from other options and I really needed to keep that other thing for the build to really work, or like I got rid of a load bearing option and now my later things are just a series of disparate options. Like that's basically what happened in my Super Smash Finder character, that I built in one direction and then changed that direction slightly in one part of the build, but not in the whole build, and just ended up with a mess of a character that I kind of let the team down.
To piggyback off the editor thought, it's actually a thing I've done. I've had a couple of GMs who are very, I won't say persnickety, but they are bad at communication, where they'll tell you, play anything, it's fine as long as it's in a Paizo book, whatever, and then you show up with like footnotes of it's out of this book on this page, etc., etc., and they're like, no, you can't play this. But why not? Just not
Does
like
this
that.
not count as anything?
Yes, do it the other way. So it's a trick that I have found, particularly if like you don't know the GM well, or you're not really sure, because if you've been playing with someone for a while, you kind of get their little ticks and what is and isn't going to work. It helps if you can highlight areas that are important both to you as a player and to the character concept. So as to go back to my earlier example for my Hell's Rebels character, of it was like, to me as a player, I really wanted his social identity to be like an important nobleman. I didn't really care which family out of Cheliax was most important, but like that social standing was kind of the cornerstone of how I wanted to play like half the character. And so it was one of those of, this is my preference for like what part of the society he falls into. I am remaining negotiable if that's not workable. Fortunately for me, the GM was like, yeah, that's fine, whatever, I don't care. But if you can highlight for them like what is important and what is less important, it gives you room to talk about like which changes you can make more easily and which ones you should really come to the negotiation table and be like, okay, here's the actual reason I would prefer you not do this. With this knowledge, will you please work with me?
I also think it's important that when you are coming up with what's important to your character, to think of this like a drafting scenario. You get you got a good quality first pick. They can't all be first picks. You're going to have to make some compromises somewhere down the table. So like decide what really is important to you, and the better you get at making characters and playing, the more you realize that list keeps getting smaller and smaller each character.
Oh, yeah.
And as long as you just like don't try to fight too hard for too much to where you're not negotiating or working with the other players. This just kind of ties into the don't be selfish kind of mentality. Remember, this is a group game and everybody's here to have fun. It's not just to make you have fun. Unless you're like hiring all the other players in the GM and like it's just some weird pay to play situation.
There's probably a podcast like that out there.
I can think of one. No. So my last step it's fairly new to my process. It's the audit, and it's because of a lot of things that we've been talking about. It's because of my failure with Say Yes, my Snake Eyes Ranger, and with Mantiz, my Goblin Oracle for Super Smash Finder. I want to make sure that any given turn, I have a couple of options and just run a couple of scenarios through and see like, have I thought this through? Is there any time where I'm just going to be like, if I can't do X, then I can't even set up X, and I've got absolutely nothing to do on my turn? I want to avoid that as much as possible. I also want to look at my character and be like, all right, so what am I missing? Do I have enough dice for this particular build? Like, is this like a D12 heavy build, and I just have to make sure I go and get a whole bunch more matching D12s because I do not want to have mismatched dice. That kind of thing. Just like making sure that for whatever excited me about the hook at the beginning, that whatever I added in the third step is valid, everything works out, and that this is a functional character ready to hit the table.
Good final step.
Agreed. If more folks did audits, it would save a lot of frustration down the line.
Mm-hmm. And then step 5, which is not really step 5. But this is when you start looking for artists to commission to draw the whole party's characters and cool stuff like that. Like
Yeah,
once you're invested and you're settled, that's when you can start spending money.
somewhere in these steps, there's like hit Hero Forge, make that mini, even just to have a visual, even if you're not going to order the mini. Hit Path Builder to make sure you're actually building the character. That stuff all comes along the way, but I feel like those are the steps that people usually talk about in character creation, whereas what we were talking about, I think, is a little bit more reflective of people, how people actually do approach their characters and how we end up with the characters that we're building outside of things like the ABCs or the CABs of character creation.
Yes, CAB is the correct way to do it.
Yeah, to close out that section of just piece of advice I have put in print dozens of times now, and of all the games that I have played, Pathfinder is the one it happens the most on. Of don't white room build your character. Of like, don't assume you're always going to have the most ideal scenario with like perfect weather and perfect scenarios, and there's no cover in like a well lit empty room. Of understand where your weaknesses are and account for those while you're making your character. Otherwise, like, something is going to crop up later on and you're going to realize you had a giant hole in what you thought was a really solid armored defense.
I think we're about ready to wrap things up. So, Neal, this was fun. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me on.
Where can people find out more about you?
Right. You can find me on Facebook. I've recently gotten active on Twitter. You can go to my blog. It has a contact me option for folks who care. I'm on Patreon for those of you with money.
What
yeah,
are the perks of your Patreon?
I don't actually have a lot at the moment because I like to give stuff away for free. But one thing I do for my patrons once a month, I will have a free download link to whatever supplement I came out with that month. It might be World of Darkness, it might be a general flavored thing, it might be something for my Sundara setting. Whatever it is, if you get in quick, you can grab yourself a free download.
Awesome. And is there anything you want to shout out to?
Yes, actually, for those who have either not picked up this project or are curious to see where it's going, I am designing a new RPG setting for Classic Pathfinder and D&D 5e. Sundara: Dawn of a New Age. It has 5 splat books out for cities, and Gods of Sundara just dropped recently, which is talking about how the cosmos might differ from what folks are used to, since this is somewhere that I stripped alignment from roof to roots. It's entirely out.
Oh, cool.
It required a lot of changing.
All right. We're going to be right back with the news. And once again, so Neal, thank you for joining us. This was fun.
Thank you. Hope to see you again.
All right. We'll be right back with the news right after this.
Pathfinder news. Pathfinder news. Pathfinder news. Pathfinder news.
Pam, are we muted?
And we're kind of back.
No,
we weren't.
Did you forget to mention to Neal that the on-air goodbye is the actual goodbye?
I think I did.
All right.
I'm so sorry,
Sorry
Neal.
about that, Neal.
Totally fine.
Bye, Neal. And we're back.
In the Pathfinder news segment, we talk about all the latest happenings for the Pathfinder role-playing game from Paizo, third-party publishers, licensees, things of note that have been happening in the world of Pathfinder. And we haven't been doing news segments so much lately. We've kind of been putting the one big news item into the shoutouts. But this week, we've got several interesting, talk-worthy items that we are going to be diving into, starting with changes to organized play.
Oh boy, there sure have been some changes announced for organized play. And honestly, I can't say it's good news. They're trying to really pitch it in a positive light, but the simple fact of the matter is they're cutting back on the amount of scenarios that are going to be released for organized play for both Pathfinder's 2nd edition and for Starfinder. They're going to produce 4, they're going to release 3 new scenarios this season for Pathfinder, 2 in September, November, December, and starting in October, 1 new scenario. And Starfinder is going to get 2 new scenarios in August and October, and then step down to 1 new scenario in September, November, and December. Oh, that hurts. That hurts.
You're saying they're trying to put it in a positive light. I did not get anything positive about that from this blog post. It was written by Eric Bona, and I feel like they were just trying to be earnest and honest about it, that scenarios are no longer going to be the primary way that people are going to interact with Pathfinder Society, and as a result, that they are slowly doing away with them. But there was one really interesting point about why they're making this change that I want to call out. It's that an adventure does not need to have the society logos to work well in the society environment. So this was based on just data, feedback, whatnot. So they'd looked into it and they'd realized if they are publishing a module, it gets as much use by Pathfinder Society as the Pathfinder Society scenarios. And this isn't specifically said there, but the reverse is not true. I don't think as many people play the Pathfinder Society scenarios without being tied to Pathfinder Society, mostly because these are PDF-only products that you can only get through the Paizo website. So if you're not playing in Pathfinder Society, there's a good chance you're not even aware Pathfinder Society scenarios are really out there.
Yeah, my opinion on that is that the reason that these modules are getting used so much is because we're already content starved. To play, you need a lot of content to play a lot of characters. If you want to play Pathfinder Society once a week, you already do not have enough content to do so. And also, has been pointed out in the chat, like if you currently want to play one of the big ACP boons, which this is going to make the problem I had with ACP massively worse. You already like you're playing like 70% of the available scenarios. Replay is not really a thing super supported right now. They seem to be hostile against it every time it gets brought up. It's always super limited when you do. So by the time you unlock the character you want to play, you've played out most of the content. And the only hope was that it was going to continue to release more content at a clip that would be fine. But if suddenly half the content's coming out, well, we don't know what the final numbers are going to be, but it's definitely taken a turn for the lower. 4 total less for Society and 2 total less for Starfinder Society. That means there's less opportunities for that character to advance. The modules themselves are absolutely not suited for most Society environments. I don't care what they say, because you can't show up to a convention and play half of a 12-hour module. You sign up for a 4-hour slot. I'm not going to be able to play half. Like it's not as easy to drop in, drop out of a module. It's you recruit for it in advance. You like most of these, even the Troubles in Atari works is okay for a one shot if it's broken into 3, but that's the exception, not the rule. I mean, these are designed for 8-12-hour sessions. You don't have slots like that. You have to make commitments all of a sudden to play through all of this. It doesn't have the drop in, drop out assumptions. It doesn't have the framing of the society to make it work with random pop up and pop down. It's just not like that argument just doesn't work at all. It's not a great argument. I'm glad you can play modules and get credit for them in Society as a supplement, but it is absolutely not a replacement.
What about the one shots? This was something that came out a couple of months ago. They were releasing a new product called One Shots. And Paizo was super on board with them, and I was like, I don't see what's exciting about this. This is just another kind of module.
Yeah, it's just another kind of module. And, like, maybe great. The bounties are fun, but they even scrub the Society off the bounties. I mean, they're just adventures that happen. They don't mention the Society at all. They don't tie into it at all. Like, the whole meta plot of it was important because it justified drop in, drop out characters that are created however wacky you want to make them, and it made it work. This and Starfinder especially, and Pathfinder 2's the changes they made there was really making it work with like these fun characters, these fun recurring quest givers, really interesting storylines. In fact, the best parts of Starfinder storyline came out of the Society adventures. Honestly, Starfinder Society kind of saved Starfinder during the year because Dead Suns didn't really land as good as they hoped it would have. I mean, it's considered the weakest of the Starfinder adventure paths for a reason.
Sluter's commented in chat kind of reflects mine, is that I haven't really been keeping track of the organized play stuff since about 2015 was his guess. Yeah, that's probably mine as well. So I do know that anytime I've thought like I could get back into Pathfinder Society, I get a little overwhelmed with like, oh, so what changes have they made to this time? What are the factions? How do factions work? What are all the little rules? And how do I even get this information? Because it just feels like finding information on the Paizo site about Pathfinder Society, it's such a mishmash of old information and accurate information.
And that is frustrating. The fact that it isn't a better onboarding situation is very frustrating. And the Organized Play Foundation split, for legal reasons that, are obvious if you look into what other organized play things have been going on in the world. Did not make it any better. At least now the rules are on a web page that are easy to flip through, but no, it's not easy to onboard into society, and that's something that could have been fixed and should have been fixed. And having some consistency, and like there was a big problem where everything was changing. It's like the infinite Marvel comic reboots where like everything was flipping on its head so many times that playing old scenarios, which you have to do because we were content starved, if you remember, was a problem. And you would go back and I'd have to say, ignore the weird magic bag on the table. It has nothing to do with you all. It's for an old faction that doesn't exist anymore. That sort of stuff was funny. But the concept worked, even if the execution needed some help.
No, Dustin in chat is saying there's an onboarding task force working on it. So my comment is based on the times that I periodically try and join in and see what's going on with Pathfinder Society. Those times I've often found that I get lost. I haven't done it in at least a few months, so I don't know what the current state is.
Yeah. I mean, I the ultimate reasons they're making these decisions, I don't know. I don't think that the time of COVID is a great time to be looking at how the success of Starfinder and Pathfinder Society was doing, because that's not exactly the same environment. Like a lot of the environments where that particular style of play thrives just isn't possible. It's worked its best for convention play and store play and drop in, drop out play. And while when you have online communities, it's so much easier to organize longer going, more organized, more story-based gameplay, because you're not having to deal with the randomness of physical meat space and those constraints that society was designed to work in. And so it's definitely not been I can see how this might not have been a great year for society, because this isn't the year where that style of play really was meant to work.
I find the opposite must be true for a couple of reasons. One is that the shipping problems that have caused delays in the physical products did not affect the PDF products. So this is an opportunity that the Pathfinder Society, like just the fact that it's all mostly PDF and all just digital, makes it one of the easiest ways to play Pathfinder. And the fact that whenever I've played Pathfinder Society, the biggest struggle was finding enough people in my area to meet at the same time who haven't played that many scenarios. Now that so many people have moved to online play, it's so much easier to just be like, all I need is to find 5 people in the world that are ready to play at this place and this time. And there's so many resources like Discord and Warhorn for just being able to jump in, and like weekly online conventions. It feels like this is the ideal situation for Pathfinder Society to be thriving.
Well, the weekly online conventions is definitely a point I'll see in your favor, but every version of Pathfinder has the same advantages you just mentioned, not just Society. Every product for Paizo is available as a pretty decently priced PDF. And if you're wanting to play pure digital, you've been able to do that for a while. I mean, Archive of Nethys has everything up for free, for goodness sake.
But so, new products like Secrets of Magic may be done and ready to release as a PDF, and they're not releasing that as a PDF until it's out as a physical book. I don't think that's actually one of the delayed ones. But anyway, replace Secrets of Magic with whatever some of the delayed adventure paths and hardcovers have been.
But the Fall of Plaguestone, those one-shot adventures, they're all released as PDFs. Like they have the same advantage. Like just the fact that their physical books exist doesn't mean that their PDFs went away.
So now Kitsune Warlock is saying, so Dustin once again is saying, cries in physical RPG accessories. So that is one of the things, is that if you are used to physical product, then this is a shift. Whereas because Pathfinder Society is always been all digital, or at least the scenarios have always been all digital, it's not as much of a shift. It's not an adjustment.
Right. Also, like, I mean, most of the time you're playing Society, you're going to be playing with GMs. The GM is the one who buys the PDF. A lot of us get it for free anyway. So, like, I don't think the sales of the PDF is really a motivator here.
No, it's
PDFs a marketing
have been described
tool.
as a loss leader before.
Yeah, they're a marketing. Pathfinder Society is a marketing tool for Paizo. I mean, being able, it's like I said many times in the podcast, Paizo being able to say, oh, you can't find a group in your area? Well, look up Pathfinder Society and you will be able to play this game, is a massive advantage in Paizo's favor. And as long as that holds true, it's still an advantage. And that's how Society should be viewed. And the costs for running Society should be viewed as a marketing budget.
Well, then to go back to the delays in products, and the Paizo, again, has not done any layoffs and has been managing to just survive and to continue to offer their products at relatively the same prices throughout all of this. Can they continue to afford to have a loss leader where it's just for marketing? And as you were saying, it's not, if it's mostly for people to be able to do meat space and to get the word out there for Paizo in gaming stores, like, there's no indication that this can't be reversed, these changes.
Right.
And so this could just be shoring up for some of the losses that Paizo's been seeing in other areas, or even in this area specifically.
That's not, I mean, they have said that, but they're definitely not the tone. The tone isn't that this is temporary. Like they say, there is the standard caveat they always give that if things change, we may reverse it. That's one of the things Tanya said in the thread, and you can say that. And the best way to prove that there's more demand for Society is to report sessions, which is to show that Society's been played. But I will say that, like, if any company that cuts their marketing budget is a bad, like, you can cut your marketing budget a little bit, but when you need money, you need to market for it. And marketing money makes you money. If the marketing money isn't making you money, you need to market differently, but you need to still keep marketing.
And there's no sign that they're not marketing differently. Right now, there's a sequence of Magic Actual Play happening opposite us, and then it's a fully produced actual play live streamed podcast. So money is being spent. They're doing trailers for all of their hardcover releases now. There is Paizo and Pathfinder are still being marketed.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I do think that in the future, Pathfinder Society is going to become as important as it always has been, because we are going to be playing in meat space again, and we are going to need, conventions are going to happen again, and there needs to be things to play at those conventions. And Society has a minimum threshold of support it needs while it's in the current format it's in. Like, if they're going to cut back drastically on the amount of playable content, like, it's not drastic yet. If this continues, it becomes drastic. It's only, like it said in chat, like right now it's only going to be a net loss of one Society for PF2. Starfinder's taking a stronger hit on this. They're losing several. But if the content slows down to a point that it's very difficult to find new content to play, then they really need to start considering things like replay and other ways to be able to reuse this content that they've got. Because that's always been a problem with Society, is you mentioned it yourself, trying to find a scenario nobody's played. And it's going to be harder if there's less scenarios.
So now Starfinder is taking the bigger hit, but it's also got the bigger back catalog. Like, Pathfinder Society has been going on for much longer, obviously, but second edition Pathfinder Society is only a couple of years old, whereas Starfinder at this point is 6 years old.
Yeah, a back catalog doesn't mean much, because so experienced players lead play groups, and experienced players are the ones that need new content.
Yeah, that's
so a back catalog doesn't help.
I had one more point before we wanted to move on. What was it, Perrin? What was my last point?
I don't know. It was your point.
Yeah, I know. I don't have it written down or anything. Well, I guess we'll never know.
If you all have found Ryan's point, you can reach out to us at nodirection@hotmail.com, or you can give us Ryan's point at our Discord server, where the chillest community is for Pathfinder and Starfinder. Just find the Discord link over at nodirectionpodcast.com, and in the general chat, or actually probably the show discussion chat, you can let us know what Ryan's point was.
I was hoping it would come to me, but it hasn't. So, all right, I guess we move on to more kind of bittersweet news. This is more strange. We got a post from Goblinworks Inc. sent to their Kickstarter and anyone that was on their mailing list. Post called The Denouement, announcing that after 6.5 years, Pathfinder Online is coming to a close.
Yeah, this is sad. I know this was I know that Paizo has done so much to keep this game and this community going when it was obvious this was never going to be the success they hoped it was. And I applaud them for keeping it going this long when I can't say any, but almost any other company would have shut this thing down years ago. And I am sad to see that it's closing. But when most people have heard this news that I've seen in the places it's discussed, the first comment is always, "It was still going?" Question mark.
That was my thought.
Yeah, I've been keeping tabs on it, so I knew it was still going, and so I knew this announcement hadn't gone out yet. And like, just to give you an idea of how dedicated Paizo was, is like Lisa Stevens taught herself how to program so that she could help keep the game running. The CEO of the company taught herself how to program to help keep the game going. They really gave this their all, and it's unfortunate that it never became what they wanted it to be, or what many players had hoped it would be. So I can't say that it hasn't had its chance in its lifetime. And they're shutting it down, but they're doing it in a weird way.
Yeah, you know what? This is actually the most I've been excited about Pathfinder Online possibly ever. This farewell post is pretty exciting. So in October, Nurathamon's own Chosen will arrive to finish the war between Death and Undeath. Will, with both the story of Pharasma's Chosen and the online world they adventure in, scheduled to end on November 28th. After that, the servers won't be coming back up, but aspects of the world we've created will live on in Golarion, initially through a blog post on Paizo's site that integrates our history, so R is in Pathfinder Online, with the larger world of Pathfinder. That write-up will be based on the final state of the world and its settlements, as well as past events. During the remaining months of operation, settlements can earn better stat blocks, more detailed write-ups, etc., by placing upgrading settlements. Anyway, just the idea that now is your chance to have one final influence on the world of Golarion through Pathfinder Online, that it is going to be worked into the campaign setting, and that we've got this big finale of the war between Death and Undeath. First time hearing about it, but it sounds epic.
Should be fun. This is actually a bit of a tradition for dying MMOs when they get the chance, is to do these huge, big closing events. City of Heroes did one. Famously, The Matrix Online did one that became canon for the Matrix storyline, which was cool. And it always is kind of exciting to get to participate in this, especially if you've been an active participant in the community all this time. It's bittersweet, but at least it will be a cool experience that will literally be once in a lifetime.
Now, that said, I don't expect I will actually be loading up my Pathfinder Online account, which I believe I have an account. I did something involving the Kickstarter, which is the reason that I also got this update, but I was never entirely clear on what my status was as a person who could play Pathfinder Online, unfortunately. And now it's coming to a close. Just a long and interesting footnote in the story of the Pathfinder.
If you kind of liked what Pathfinder Online was doing, go check out Amazon's New World. It's an MMO that's you can play right now that is very similar in goal and objective, and it's really fun. So, like, as this world is coming to an end, there's some opportunities. Maybe consider moving your guild over there.
Is that it for the news, Baron?
No!
What?
We got some good news!
Oh, yeah, of course. Sorry, there's one
tomorrow.
More point.
Yes! We were saving it for last because we didn't want to end the show on a bad note. But yeah, some good news. This is technically Starfinder news. But Starfinder's getting a Humble Bundle with all the goodies. I don't know the details are in this bundle because it sounds like somebody broke embargo. Because this post went up on Polygon and then none of the links work and you go to Humble Bundle and you can't find it. So it looks like it's launching tomorrow, a Starfinder bundle, which is going to, if it's anything like any of the past Pathfinder bundles, this is going to be a great time to jump into Starfinder. I expect to see like the core rulebook and the adventure path and bestiary. No, sorry. The alien archives available in it, especially since the Castervalian T-Rexes are on the cover of the art they're using to advertise this. That highly suggests a bestiary Alien Archive 2 is going to show up at least.
So traditionally, the Paizo-related Humble Bundles have had a physical product level, and it's saying here that the Starfinder Packed Worlds and the Starfinder Beginner Box will be the products that, if you back at the $50 level, you'll get them as physical products. I believe you then pay for shipping on top of that.
Yeah.
Whereas some examples of some of the PDF products will be Packed Worlds again, Starfinder Adventure Skitter Home, Starfinder Society Scenario, The Withering World, Starfinder Adventure Path, Dawn of Flame, Book 4 of 6, The Blind City, and much more with a $400 value on all of the content.
I will say the Packed World's great book to get as a physical book. It's a very good Starfinder book. The beginner box is good for all the things inside the beginner box. It's probably...
Was the Starfinder beginner box a truncated version of the rules?
Yeah, a truncated, and like Starfinder didn't really need that because Starfinder's pretty good and simple to follow. And it's a truncated version of Starfinder, which you probably won't use all that much. And kind of, I think it's not like Pathfinder beginner box where the truncated version of the rules could lead you to learning the full version more easily. In my opinion, the Starfinder beginner box is it will confuse you when you move on to the full version of the rules. But it's got pawns, dice, cool maps, like all the cool things you want out of a box. So that's always great.
Can't say one of
Pathfinder 2 beginner box is great.
Yep, Pathfinder 2 beginner box is one of my favorites. Although, so I've got a week off next week, and so do the girls. And I am thinking of finally introducing Scarlet to Starfinder to Pathfinder by way of the beginner box. But first, I'm going to make some changes, and I'm thinking of writing a blog post about some of the changes that I made. One of them is that instead of starting with a fight against rats, I'll fight against something fantastic and more interesting than rats, and don't have to make her feel like she's killing a bunch of animals.
Maybe try the Starfinder. Scarlet would make a
I don't know
wonderful
the Starfinder
Skittermander
box, I don't think.
Well, you wouldn't want to use it. Just do a normal Starfinder.
I do have normal Starfinder. That's true.
Yeah, and Scarlet is a Skittermander.
I don't know Starfinder. I don't think I could teach Starfinder. I would be learning half the time. Whereas Pathfinder 2nd Edition, I know well enough that I could run the beginner box for sure and make changes on the fly, and also other changes planned ahead of time.
All right, that works. Have fun, Scarlet. Killing not rats.
There'll be rats in everything but name and presentation. I think we're about ready to wrap things up.
Mm-hmm.
We'll be right back with shoutouts right after this.
Wrap-ups and shoutouts. Wrap-ups and shoutouts. Wrap-ups. Wrap-ups and shoutouts.
And we're back.
Thank you for joining us for episode 255 of No Direction, the No Direction Network's Pathfinder News, Reviews, and Interviews podcast. Thanks once again to our guest, Neal Litherland, from the Improved Initiative blog, which is at take10.blogspot.com. We had a little conversation beforehand about how it's the Improved Initiative blog, but Take 10 is actually a really cool name for a gaming blog, but it ends up that was his second choice, and then Improved Initiative as a domain was already taken. So it is both the Take 10 blogspot and the Improved Initiative blog. Before we go, we're going to give some shout outs to some things that we think are cool, starting with Justin Sluder. Just made a comment that the rats could be pinata rats. I am thinking I might do some pinata rats. That is a wonderful idea. That would be colorful and entertaining, and I could really have a lot of fun describing them being destroyed without traumatizing my daughter.
Have you played the game We Happy Few?
No. Or have
So
I?
it's not a good game.
Okay.
But it has a cutscene that's pretty famous where people are taking this medicine that makes the world seem like a much better place. And there's this part where they beat down the pinata and start eating the insides of the pinata of the yummy candy.
Yep, I see where that's going.
Uh-huh.
Well, if I did it, it would actually be animated pinatas. Some kind of pinata golem.
Just make sure Scarlett doesn't ever watch that trailer.
I don't think she will. I don't think that's a problem.
Wonderful. My first shout out is to a YouTube channel, a Pathfinder YouTube channel that's pretty new to the scene. 1DM. It is the care-op math deep dive Mark Seifterist kind of channel on the internet for Pathfinder 2, and it's wonderful. Go check it out. My favorite is they've got two videos that I like the best. One is the power of a +1, where he breaks down the how effective a single +1 is in Pathfinder, and like maths it out to damage output and really throws up some good visuals to help understand what's going on, and it really is a good way. And then the other one is an overview of proficiencies, where he breaks down all of the proficiency ranks that all the classes get and how they stack up to each other, and to understand the basic core math of the game. And it also points out some of the balance problems of Pathfinder 2 that need to be addressed, such as what's wrong with you fighters, and also, yeah, casters, you got a little bit rough, don't you? You're bad at everything.
What is the channel?
1DM, as in 1D4, but ilm instead.
What?
Yeah.
I'm having trouble finding it. So
you have to
the number
basically
one?
search the number 1 DM. I'm gonna throw a link into the Twitch chat to help.
Heck yeah, because nothing is coming up.
Yeah, it took me a while to find it when I was looking for it too. So basically search for 1DM space Pathfinder, and then you'll find it.
Okay. Yeah, it's 1 small d, capital M, all one word. Maybe I was separating it more like it was 1 Dungeon Master. And I was surprised that it was a Pathfinder specific channel, just because 1DM made it sound like at the very least a general gaming, if not Dungeons & Dragons specific. So I've just subscribed. I'm their 252nd subscriber, and it seems like they've got 3 videos up to play. Wow, 30 minutes, 9 minutes, and 15 minutes. They're kind of all over the place. So I will check them out this week.
Yeah, like I said, it's a new channel, definitely experimenting with what they're going to want to be. They got an invite to this Saturday's Rat and Chat.
Oh, yes, talk about that.
Yeah, so we're going to be doing Rat and Chat again on Saturday. This time, we hope it works, and then we have a usable video. I'm going to record an offline version just to be sure of it this time. And it's going to be me, Tommy from Black Dragon, and 1DM's invited to join along, of course. I don't know if we'll fill the 4th slot with someone, but the basic idea is we are going to we're going to get online stream, chat about Pathfinder and RPGs and all that stuff, while simultaneously playing Vermintide and killing lots of rats as the background activity. But the key draw is we're going to be chatting industry insider stuff about Pathfinder.
Speaking of industry insiders and YouTube, I want to give a shout out to Owen Casey Stevens' YouTube channel. He has recently been doing a lot of new content with Stan. They've got a new show called What the What, live streams on Facebook, and then they post it to his YouTube channel. It's just an hour of them, old friends and industry veterans, just chatting about game stories, chatting about what's up in their lives. Both of them are very sweet people and engaging speakers, and so I love popping in whenever I can. And also, Owen's been uploading either new versions or old videos where he just tells just gaming stories. One of my favorite is the Rebel Lieutenant, where do you know this story?
Oh yeah, it's it's probably his most known video.
So that's on his channel now, and more. Sorry, I got derailed somehow. Just more stories along those lines, and just Owen being Owen. Owen is a very pleasant person, very fun to watch, and so he's always good for content. And his YouTube channel is an area that he's doing a lot of focus on right now.
I want to shout out to a PC game that is going to be super relevant to us Pathfinder friends, which is Wildermyth. This is a really experimental RPG that is trying some techniques on procedural story generation. And it is fascinating and ridiculously fun to play. You make a character and then you define their relationship with the other characters, and it's basically procedurally generating the story of this world that you're in, and it is going to be randomized as you do the runs of the game. But it's this high fantasy story. It kind of has a lot of Mwangi-like elements. So if you were a big fan of some of the Mwangi Expanse, there's a lot of flavor that matches that here. It definitely has a lot of the same influences that we were seeing in Mwangi Expanse happening here. And it is just really great from a story side. And then as far as the gameplay, it's a grid-based, turn-based tactic RPG when it's time for swords to hit swords, with a fun magic system where the magicians call on the power of whatever is in the environment. So if you want to, the magician goes, okay, what's around here? Tree. You click on the tree and you're like, oh, tree, splinter explosion from the tree. And that's how I do magic. And these procedural events will happen. Like one of my characters found, like I made a main character who was she was this soldier, like stoic leader character. And the cool thing is you can play it co-op with somebody, and then you can divide up the party. Say, okay, you get these two characters and you're going to get to make the story and conversation decisions with them and control them in combat. I'll get these two characters and do the same. So I was playing with one of my Chris, one of my game group friends, through the story. I created a stoic warrior lady to lead us, and then she discovered this old wolf shrine to the old gods, and she prayed at it, and she became a werewolf. And so she came back out and she had like a wolf head, and then we renamed her Best Girl. And then from then on, I'm doing the funny voices when I'm reading all the text. So from then on, she had a very good dog voice from there on out, because she was the best girl and she was going to save the party and be the best tank ever. And that's just like one of the random things that can happen. And it's just, and each of the stories feeds into the next run, because as long as your world doesn't get destroyed, which can happen, you play generations of you play the next generation when the next big bad event happens and the next big threat to the world comes on, and you do slowly start to unravel what it generates as your main overarching world story. And that can go well if you are building up these settlements and making these generational adventurers in each run. And each run can be like 10 to 12 hours total. So like it's an investment to do it. It's like you get a whole RPG campaign worth of storytelling each run. And then the next run, those old characters have aged up a number of years and are still in the world. You can bring some of them on to adventure as your new party, or you can have their kids or just people they trained or knew. And that ties into each other. And if you screw up enough, your world gets destroyed and it deletes itself, and you have to start a whole new world.
Whew. Okay. What is the is it like kind of 8-bit, 16-bit retro so that they can fit more computing power in without the graphic taking up a lot of the computer?
It looks like papercraft with modern lighting effects. It's actually really cool art style. I like it, but it looks good. Like most computers can run it, but it is definitely a modern game with modern graphics. But it's like papercraft 2D characters on papercraft backgrounds, and it looks really nice.
Cool. What was it called again?
Wildermyth.
Wildermyth.
Yeah,
that's a pretty cool name.
Yeah. And so it's like I said, it's fun to play solo, and it's really fun to play with a friend. You can. It's available on Steam. I know it's probably available on other platforms too. But yeah, it's a great game. It's also like only like $20, so like go check it out. It's wonderful.
Gonna give a couple of network shout outs, and because we've had like 3 weeks in a row of no directions, I've been shouting out to most of the network content, so I'll shout out to the two posts from today. We've got Game Design Unboxed number 20, Dinosaur Island. So not only is Dinosaur Island a really cool game, but it's also very clear what the inspiration is, and so the designer Jonathan Gilmore goes into why didn't he just try and make a Jurassic Park game? What is it about Jurassic Park he wanted in there versus what freedom does he have not actually making it a licensed game? That was really interesting. But one of my favorite things about the episode is later on into it, Danielle shares an anecdote. She'll often share about how she had pitched to him because at this point he works for Pandasaurus as a game developer and takes a lot of the pitches for new projects. And that she was pitching to him at like 6 o'clock on the Gen Con floor, and she made a comment about how this is probably his last pitch of the day, and he said no, he's going back to his room and he's going to start taking online pitches. And they talk about how if you only take pitches from the people that can make it to Gen Con, you are severely limiting the number of people that can get into the game industry and also the number of cool games you could potentially be getting access to. And so some of the most interesting and unique games that they would be getting pitches for were the ones that he would take in these after-hour pitch meetings that his publisher was even saying, you don't have to do this, and I'm not even sure if it's healthy for you to take pitches all day and then also all night. But he said that he would rather be giving those people an opportunity to get their ideas out there, even if they can't, necessarily get to another city, or even if they're in that city, not necessarily be able to get the day off from work, or, so get somebody to mind their kids so that they can get there during the con hours and get their pitches in. He just came off like a really good guy, and that one anecdote there really shows why he is so cool and such an important person to have in the game industry at this time.
And that really, that's super true. And like I mean, how I got into the industry is definitely due to going to Gen Con and getting in those connections. I don't know about your story, but so many of the stories involve going to major convention and shaking hands and making contacts. And honestly, that's still probably one of the easiest ways to get into the industry today. Well, not today because conventions and all the terribleness, but up until the terribleness, that was still true and is likely still going to be true for a while unless we have a major industry shakeup. There's so much we take for granted, and there's so much privilege in being able to spend thousands of dollars to go to a Gen Con in person, and that is just not available for the majority of the world.
And then my other network shout out is for Alex's article today. It is his latest gibbering mouther. He calls it "Which is my favorite," and he's going through his likes and dislikes about 5e, Pathfinder 1, 2, and Starfinder. And he doesn't give a big overview of any of those systems. He really does just focus on, this is something that exclusively this system does well. This is something that exclusively this system has these issues. And it's kind of like the capstone of a series that he's been doing, where he's really just breaking down the different systems and his own personal experiences with them. Because at this point, Alex really seems like he's in this discovery phase in his life as a geek, where he is just taking in a variety of different systems and getting a good feel for what else is out there. And in this one, he really caps off that series of blogs he's been doing. It's really good insight. He does some analysis that I've never seen before about editions that I'm familiar with, and gives me a taste for editions that I'm less familiar with, or not just editions, like full games like 5e and Starfinder. And so, if you are looking for more of Alex's thoughts on these games, this is probably my favorite in his series, where he's just breaking down the different games.
Yeah. It's a very good read, and it's fascinating because I know, like, Alex is a close friend, and I know, like, his experiences and lack of experience with, like, number of games to play, but also to realize that Alex has written professionally for most of these systems, if not all of them, at some point in his career.
Has he done 5e yet?
I don't know if he's done any 5e. I know that he's been encouraged to.
All right, my final shout out. I appeared on the General Geekery podcast actually just came out today, maybe. I appeared on it over the weekend. It is a G.I. Joe podcast, and we reviewed Snake Eyes G.I. Joe Origins.
You've seen it?
Yeah, I've seen it. It came out a week ago. What do you think I'm doing with my life?
I have lost all track of time and space. I'm sorry.
It is not a movie I think too highly of, but the co-host had me on and said like he really did want to focus on the positive, and by just talking about the things that I mainly liked about the movie and also having the opportunity to talk about the things I wasn't so happy with, I just came off with a better taste in my mouth about Snake Eyes, because most of my problems with that movie are in the last act, so it leaves a really bad last impression. But there is a lot of good stuff in there, whether you're a G.I. Joe fan or not, and it is definitely an interesting movie with a lot of choices that were made.
You know what it has to its unarguable advantage?
What's that?
It's a new movie that has released this year, and those are few and far between right now.
Yeah, and yet it opened second behind M. Night Shyamalan's new movie Old, about the beach that makes you old. It is a movie that apparently there is no audience for, and this was supposed to be the kickoff of a new, not just G.I. Joe franchise, but a combined Hasbro cinematic universe. Ooh. And it is not doing well. I think it made $13 million, and that's not good. There was very little competition.
Hasbro has a habit of putting things on a shelf when they do this. Are you afraid G.I. Joe's going on a shelf?
No, because G.I. Joe's in a really weird spot where it is the hottest toy line in toys right now, and it has not been that for a long time. Or at least it's got a lot of collector buzz because it is hard to come by a lot of the new toys as they come out. Especially, it's got a lot of Target exclusive figures, and the new line, the G.I. Joe Classified line. Oh, let me grab one. Let me grab Zartan because he is the bomb. So yeah, these are amazing figures in their own right. They're incredible homages to the original designs. He's got you're going to really like this. His backpack is a 3D printer, and it creates the mask.
That is so cool.
Yeah, it's really clever. Like, every single one of the figures in this line so far has been at least good, if not great. And if people could just get their hands on them, they'd be a lot happier. I'm not going to put him down right now. So the toy line is doing very well, and it just seems like this movie is done so catastrophically bad that it is probably going to force them to either muscle forward and say, like, we've got enough plans, we've just got to do at least the first 3 steps of the plans we've got made, or for them to just scrap everything as far as the movies go. But they've got that Lady J Amazon Prime series that's in the works. Like, they have so much in the works, and so much of it was riding on Snake Eyes making decent money and having decent reviews, neither of which it got.
Oh no.
I know.
Oh,
like,
sorry,
right now,
Snake
it's the first time I'm working on a Hasbro property. This is like, as someone who is in some ways an employee working on G.I. Joe stuff, and it's like,
we have to disclaimer that.
Great. Yeah, we do. So I am working, not that people are like, oh, he's biased, he's only saying positive things about this movie. I am giving my honest opinion about the movie. I am just feeling a little more hesitant about it, just because, man, I am excited about the RPG to come out, and for Renegade Con Virtual Special Edition, which is in a couple of weeks. And we really will dive deep into what's going on there. And Renegade just announced the G.I. Joe deck building game, which is a cooperative deck building game, and that's coming out in a few months as well. Like, there's so much good going on with G.I. Joe, and Snake Eyes should not have been the black mark on G.I. Joe's record for the last couple of years that it's become.
Well, I mean, the other movies didn't kill G.I. Joe. Snake Eyes can't either.
Yeah, and also, like, did you know this was a full reboot? It feels like there's some confusion there, and people thought this was an origin continuation of the last 2 movies.
I thought it was a continuation.
No, completely divorced from the last couple of movies.
Oh, good. It'll be that much easier to ignore it next movie.
See, some of the best stuff about this movie is the world building, and it actually made me excited for what a G.I. Joe movie set in that universe could be, even if I did not particularly like this one. Which is, so I don't want another reboot. I want them to fix this.
But they didn't do that with the Dark Universe.
No. So that's like, you've got stuff like the Dark Universe, and you've got examples like Iron Man 2, where it's like kicking off a whole new franchise, and they sacrifice the movie that it's in for the sake of plans that just never come to fruition because they were too farsighted. Snake Eyes doesn't sacrifice itself to make a G.I. Joe shared universe. It actually, every time something from G.I. Joe comes into the play, it actually makes the movie a little bit better. So when you're introduced to Scarlet and Baroness and G.I. Joe and Cobra as just little elements in what is otherwise a martial arts movie about the Arashikage clan and this one guy, Snake Eyes.
So is it just that comic line, the movie?
No. So so many of my issues with it are spoilers.
Okay.
In a lot of ways, it's flipped. Like, it really feels like they gave Snake Eyes Storm Shadow's origin.
Mm-hmm.
Because this probably isn't a spoiler because it's the first scene. So the movie opens with the death of Snake Eyes' dad. Right. And then we definitely get the impression that he is doing anything he can to find Snake Eyes, to find out who his father's murderer was, including joining the Yakuza. So this all happens in the first act. So that's not really spoilers. And that's similar to in Storm Shadow's backstory in the comics, is he joins Cobra to figure out who killed his uncle because Cobra Commander has that information. And so even though he's a good guy, he is willing to do bad things to do what he feels is right. Dustin saying tonight's topic is 1E character creation. PFS needs more love. Pathfinder Online news. G.I. Joe movie underperforming. And he says, in time loop, this is 2015.
Some of us never left 2015.
Yeah, 2015 was an okay year, I think. I don't know. It's been a while.
It's a really great year.
Oh, good. So anyway, no, to answer your question, this is not the G.I. Joe origin. The comic origin of Snake Eyes. This is a whole new original origin that just happens to share a lot with Storm Shadow's comic book origin.
So what needs to happen here is I need to go watch this movie.
That'd be good.
Then we need to have a spoiler cast.
Sounds good. Also, I should say, don't watch that General Geekery episode I was on if you don't want it to be spoiled. That is a full spoiler review.
Roger.
Yeah. And Snake Eyes is only in theaters, so you can't watch it at home. You're going to have to actually find a theater that's playing it.
Oh. This becomes hard. We just went back in lockdown.
I wonder if that was a poor decision on their part to not make it also a streaming exclusive somewhere.
I bet it gets there real fast.
I've already seen there's an announcement about its DVD release, or its Blu-ray release.
So I'll be able to watch it on Amazon soon then.
Probably.
Whew. Yeah, we went. My work county is at 59. Like, we were down to 1%. Okay.
Wow.
And now we're up to 59% in my work county. And we're a school, so we have service counties that come to us. And one of our service counties is at 89%.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Is it?
And it's all
Delta
the
variant?
Delta. And it's the Delta. Yeah. It's the Delta. And that's terrible. So, yeah. So, like, we just got mask mandate got put back in effect for my area literally an hour before this podcast.
So we're about ready to wrap things up. I know that normally we do our Patron's Private Sanctum after this. I don't know if I'm up for it. It's getting late here. We've done 3 weeks in a row, and it's my birthday tomorrow. I think I'd like to actually be awake for it. In fact, it's my birthday right now in Australia. I know. All right, so even though we won't be doing a Patron's Private Sanctum, or I won't, you are welcome to, Param, but if you do, can you record it and send me the recording?
Sure. I need Dustin, help me. We need to do a Patron Private Sanctum, and I can't talk to myself for an hour.
All right, well, Numbat is saying that they will miss it, and Dustin, you've been super active in chat, so please let Param know that you'll be able to join him. There we go.
Thank you.
So, Param, Patron's Private Sanctum, what are we talking about?
That's because after every episode of No Direction, we have the after party, the Patrons Private Sanctum, the show for our patrons, directed by our patrons, where we talk about whatever our patrons ask us to talk about. You can do so by joining us on Patreon at patreon.com/nodirection or clicking on the Patreon link at nodirectionpodcast.com. Make sure you link your Discord account, because then you'll gain access to the special Discord channel where you can drop in and listen to us after every episode of No Direction.
Until next time, I'm Ryan Costello.
And I'm Jefferson J. Thacker, also known as Param.
And if you want to find the path, you need no direction.